So, hi, John. Thanks for being here. Can you see us as well? I don't know exactly how this works. Is it two ways?
No, this is only a one-way feed. I can see myself, unfortunately. I appreciate the
All right. Well, we have a lot of friendly people here. Very excited to hear from you. It's really my great pleasure to introduce you. John is a interdisciplinary artist, works as a filmmaker, an animator, as an installation artist, and his work has really evolved around the notion of history versus memory. And with the work that we had here at the Speed in Supernatural America, it was also a work that really tried to share and shape alternative narratives around the history of the United States and, of course, how this country was colonized and how the power dynamics of the colonization had a big impact on who we are today. So John Jota Leaños has a very interesting background as a Mestizo artist. And I don't want to share too much, and I hope that you will delve into that, but both Xicano and Italian American, but also Native American. So I'm sure that in your upbringing alone, there were a lot of different tension points and perspectives and point of views that you were navigating. And I feel that you are, with your work, really diving deeper into the conversations between these different perspectives and the tension between them. So, John, just to share a few highlights from his impressive resume, has been a Guggenheim Fellow of Film and Media, a Creative Capital Artist, and a United States Artist Fellow. His practice, as I said earlier, includes a range of media arts, documentary, animation, video, public art, installation, and performance. His work has been shown at the Sundance Film Festival, the Cannes Film Festival, the Whitney Biennial, the San Francisco Museum of Art, at Manifesta 13, and so on and so on. So it's really a pleasure to have you here, John. And again, Erica is deeply saddened that she can't be here this evening, but we are thrilled to hear from you. So please help me welcome John Jota Leaños.
Thank you, Rafael. Thank you. I just wanted to, first of all, just say thank you to Karen Tate and Abby Shu and Erica, Holmos Wall, and the Speed Museum crew and donors and board for inviting me out. I really appreciate it. I apologize for not being present. We were looking forward to meeting several of you in Louisville, and I'm just really being hyper conscious of the ongoing community health crisis as I work with Indigenous community or Indigenous California leaders and elders over the next 3 months on a project. So I'm just trying to be extra careful. But we are sending lots of California love to you all, some warmth, hopefully, some Bay Area vibes as I'm reporting from San Francisco. Hope that you're all healthy and safe out there. And I wish I really could be out there. So just to kind of give a context, I am a Californio, Southern California born with most of my life here in San Francisco. My father's family is Mexicano and also California Indian of the Chumash tribe. My mother's family is of Italian American Lithuanian descent. And so, in being in academia, I also teach at UC Santa Cruz. Young people have been beginning to challenge the limitations of our language systems in terms of gender identity and how in the context of like toxic patriarchy, for example. And so they begin to kind of challenge pronouns. And so I think this is a great thing. And so I'll offer this to you, that my pronouns are he, him, and his, and they and theirs. And she and her. You can really call me anything because gender is fluid, right? But we also use we, us, and our as pronouns to recognizing the complex relations with human and non-human entities in the context of toxic, and just acknowledging the great collaboration that bears our survival and continuance. We also use we and us and our as pronouns to acknowledge our ancestors, especially the funny ones. We really appreciate the funny ancestors, and a shout out to them as they kind of guide us along in this journey, that short journey that we have together in life. As a Chicano, California Indian, white passing, mestizo, güero, borderlands artist, we're really concerned with decolonial strategies, connecting artwork and media for and with and by Latino, Latinx, and Native and communities primarily. Our work is interdisciplinary, which means we experience imposter syndrome in several disciplines. And we try to work through creation, knowledge creation and continuance with a sense of humility and wonder. And so I'd like to begin by first by asking for forgiveness and permission from elders and stewards of knowledge, whose knowledge and experiences are deeper and more extensive than my own. So I'm going to share a screen here of it. This was the exhibition that came through the Speed Art Museum, Supernatural America, of which I had a piece, and I've been interested in the supernatural, ghosts and specters and hauntings as well for many years, and so this has kind of been a subtext or sub theme of the work that I've been doing, and hopefully kind of I have some ideas about it, and have been thinking through the notion of this exhibition and very other theorists, the idea of America as a haunted place, right? And it's really a commonly held belief that America is haunted because of its unwillingness to come to terms with its violent and horrific past, right? This kind of metaphor of the snakes swimming in a flooded basement where nobody really wants to go down there to kind of deal with it. And these theories have been, America as a haunted place has been theorized by Eve Tuck and Avery Gordon and Robert Gozzolino and many others, right? This idea of the ghosts of Indians has really been a settler obsession since their arrival in North America, and has become kind of a part of the local folklore in many places, and also a part of the national film and literature spectrum of the United States. So the Enlightenment really describes Native as inherently irrational, and superstitious, a people in need of civilization, correction, and rationality. And these characteristics have also been applied to Native spirits in a way. And the American settler is kind of equally obsessed on the one hand with and disinterested in its original sin against Native Americans. So Native ghosts tend to haunt white settler literature and film in America and also Canada. And it's kind of littered with this Indian burial ground trope that you see where innocent settlers are haunted by past wrongdoings. And so you see this in horror and ghost stories and sci-fi and speculative fiction as well, which were often kind of, these genres are often a reflection of real social anxieties projected onto the screen or onto the future in the case of sci-fi. So I wanted to kind of look at some of these examples where we see kind of the indigenous ghost appearing, right? And the trope of the Indian burial ground is really rich in American film and literature. You see the Amityville Horror, which is at the top there, which is based on a true crime event of a white man who murdered his family, but blamed on the fact that the house was haunted because of an indigenous sacred site was once there. This is all, of course, fiction, right? The Shining, Stephen King's novel, which turned into a hit film, where it takes place in the Overlook Hotel, which supposedly was built on an Indian burial ground between 1907 and 1908. This trope continues in Stephen King's Pet Cemetery, a book, and then made into a film where there's a nice little cemetery for a place to bury your little cat, became a haunted ceremony because underlying it was the indigenous undead there haunting these pets, I guess. And then, of course, you have the Brady Bunch, the Hawaii episode. I don't know if anybody's seen that. I'd like to kind of, it'd be great to be there to see your heads. If anybody's seen this Brady Bunch episode where the tiki is kind of worn and all different types of bad things start happening to the white folks there. So it is a pretty interesting trope. But then you, of course, you have your girl Buffy, the vampire, right? Who in, I guess it is episode Pangs, right? There a Chumash warrior appears. I haven't seen this episode. I've only read about it, but I found this great little GIF where the Chumash warrior turns into a bear. Apparently on Thanksgiving, Buffy encounters a restless, vengeful spirit who's Chumash, and during a tense confrontation, the Slayer fights a losing battle with her formidable foe. But a mysterious protector watches over her. I can't really figure out whether the Chumash warrior bear is defeated in the end, or I couldn't really figure that out from reading about it. Maybe you all can fill me in as well. But there's kind of littered with ways in which these depictions, we see it in Friends, in the comedy series Friends. Phoebe, I believe, brings something to adorn Monica's new antique dollhouse, which is a handkerchief ghost. And she claims that this is because the house is built on an ancient Indian burial ground. The Incredible Hulk has these, Donald Duck and Boneyard, and on and on and on. And this is only in film and media recently. If you look at Washington Irving and Nathaniel Hawthorne's literature, or even Charles Brockton Brown's work, they're kind of filled with the depictions of indigenous representations and indigenous peoples who emerge as monsters or ghosts, frightening the protagonist and driving them towards horrible feats, usually. So I find this really interesting in a matter of kind of locating the idea of what Eve Tuck calls the settler move towards innocence. And there's several things that I find interesting here. And one is the idea of the innocence of the haunted, right? In all settler literature and film, the protagonist, i.e. the one who is haunted by the ghosts, is considered innocent, benevolent, and undeserving of such natural harassment, right? Or paranormal harassment. So they don't really deserve it. It's because something that happened, they kind of come out of it in the end. This directly correlates to kind of this perceived self-innocence of United Statesians or Canadians as well. And then also simultaneously, there's a blaming of indigenous spirits for kind of projecting people to do horrible feats, like you see in Amityville Horror, the book in particular, because I think there are like 17 films based after that. So there's a simultaneous disavowal of the responsibility of one's actions, a disavowal and distancing of one's actions of one's ancestors as well, and the accusation of the other for the action. And we see this kind of play out in real time with Karens on social media, kind of falling into victimhood all of a sudden. So this is a really interesting kind of dynamic in horror and in haunting and ghosts in relation to indigenous ghosts. And what I find also intriguing about the settler psyche in this case is how United Statesians convert their guilt of wrongdoings of the past, of the barbarity of the past, into entertainment, right? Because ghosts and hauntings really occupy the space of entertainment media, right? For us generally, right? So you see Halloween, films we have. If America is a haunted place, I would say United Statesians are certainly not taking hauntings seriously. Ghosts and the paranormal often occupy the amusement, the diversion, the somatic pleasure that comes with after this initial spike in adrenal fear. Then we realize, oh, we're going to be all right. So it is really an interesting. The reason I went on that black slide is so that we don't get distracted by this this bear thing over here, which I find very interesting and intriguing and kind of funny. So, you know, this right here is the shell mound of Emeryville, California, which is just on the edge of Oakland, California, just in the Bay Area. And the shell mounds, there are many of them created by indigenous people for hundreds of thousands of years in this area, and were created by our ancestors as ceremonial places, right, as burial sites. And people would come and they would trade with each other. They would have ceremony on top of these mounds, and children were buried with their mothers who had been lost in childbirth, elders with babies, and so forth. And so in the turn of the century, after the gold rush, these shell mounds, the settlers didn't really know what to do with them. So one of the largest ones, as you see in the bottom right-hand corner here, they turned it into an amusement park. And if you would take a ferry across the bay, get a train over here, come up here and go into this pavilion up here. And up on this pavilion, they held a dancing. So they would actually be literally dancing on the graves of indigenous peoples, right? So which I find kind of pretty fascinating as a way to engage. Today, Emory shell mounds were taken down. There was a Sherman-Williams paint factory there for decades, and when that was taken down to build what is now the Emeryville Mall, you see up here, they found indigenous bones kind of sitting in vats of paint, and that were rubberized and kind of and they had to kind of rebury these ancestors in spots that are underneath this mall right here. And I wish I could tell you that settlers are haunted when buying new shoes at Foot Locker or getting new undies at Victoria's Secret. But even though the ancestors have been buried in this mall and this place is a site of sacred ceremony, I don't think that consumers really think twice about them. And it is really in the context of California that we have, you know, this kind of like disconnect, right, between because you see historically in between 1846 and 1873, perhaps 80% of California Indians died, many to massacres that left no survivors. And payments were made to vigilante groups to murder California Indians in an extermination project, their words, not mine. And this is right here, a bond of the state of California for $250 for the murders of indigenous peoples, right? And so they would bring scalps and arms and baby arms and what have you, and get these vouchers. And the total amount was $1.5 million in bonds in 1870 money, right? Which is approximately 800 million to $1 billion, which was then reimbursed by the U.S. federal government. And people, California was paying $25 a scalp, which is, you know, over $1,000 a murder in today's dollars or so. And it's really a surprise that we are still here. You know, indeed, you know, colonization is a frightening project. One that holds at the core genocide, violence, dominance. However, you know, settler colonialism, is really settlers are not victims of ghosts of settler colonial past. And this is where I kind of break from this idea of America is haunted by its genocidal past, because rather I think it is people of color, it is underrepresented minorities who are victims of an ongoing haunting in material ways, right? Whether it be incarceration, generational poverty, gendered violence. It is the settlers who continue to perpetuate the haunting in their will to entitlement, their will to ownership, their will to amnesia, their will towards continued violence. And I'm really not concerned. I'm not concerned with the translucid, the luminescent, the amorphous notion of ghosts, but rather I'm interested in the material realities of ghosts and spirits. And the material reality in settler hauntings takes place in the everyday, and is not the settler who is haunted. in somatic and psychic and material ways. It is settler society that haunts specifically people of color in everyday places, right? So, because we've seen that America as a country, United States, it has established a culture that begets violence, expects violence, and also reflects violence within its media, right? Whether it be symbolic violence, institutional violence, legislative violence, or just plain bloody settler barbarity, right? And we see this in the sciences, whether the history of phrenology, dancing on shell mound graves, the bones collected at UC Berkeley's museum. This was the remains of an 1860 war called the Indian Island Massacre, in which hundreds of people were buried and were murdered, and the remains collected in 1953 and then put in storage at UC Berkeley, only returned a couple of weeks ago to the Wiyot tribe and held, so that you could see that this type of kind of violence, of the inability to kind of put your ancestors to rest, is something that is ongoing, right? The 1890 massacre at Wounded Knee, those remains, those ancestors still remain at the Smithsonian. And so you have these material hauntings. Black folks are haunted while driving, in period, or being in certain neighborhoods. Black and brown folks are haunted by the actions or even presence of the police. Going for a run as a Black person can be a dangerous and haunting place. Women are haunted at having to walk somewhere alone at night, right? Women will say that they don't expect violence, but they are definitely prepared for it, right? Migrants are haunted by ICE and ICE raids that can happen at any moment, anywhere, 99-cent stores, homes, the place of work, anytime. And there's a kind of a settler reaction saying, hey, you should just follow the laws, follow the rules, and everything will be all right. But everything is kind of set up as within the logic of racial capitalism that is embedded to the system. And this is what critical race theory actually does. It looks at how white folks have established these laws in engaging a race and defining what race is. The murdered and missing Indigenous women are haunted. In Indian residential schools continue to haunt Indigenous communities as well. So there's definitely a kind of a practice of haunting. I'm wondering whether this is the idea that settlers are scared of, the fact that these monuments, which are being corrected now, and that history and memory interventions will be disrupted. You know, we have when Junipero Serra was sainted by the Pope, we had several interventions along the coast of California, and by several people as well. This piece is in Monterey Bay, which is the site of Junipero Serra's mission, and his head disappeared for a while, and then several months later, it was washed ashore in the bay. And I was speaking to Esselen tribal leader Louise Baranda, and she said, you know, the ocean spit the head out. You see, she didn't even want it. So we have these kind of interventions within. This is the Los Angeles Junipero Serra. Here at San Rafael, of course, in New Mexico, the obelisk torn down in Santa Fe. This is happening in Palma de Mallorca in Spain, and throughout the Americas. This is ongoing, of the kind of removal of anti-native and then also kind of racist statues, the Daughters of the Confederacy, and their whole movement to kind of rewrite history books and engage in monument, Robert E. Lee statues as well. This is being challenged now, and this is why we see this kind of a battle of history happening here in the country, and this kind of fight for what 1690 Project calls the origin story, right? And this fight is really kind of taking on decolonial results in a way, right? And so we have several examples of land being returned to indigenous tribes through organizing. Governor Newsom out of California allowed Caltrans to return the Blues beach property to the Sherwood Valley Band of Pomo Indians, the Round Valley Indian tribes, and Coita Valley Band. This is no small feat, because if you know, California coastal land is just super highly valued. And so this is one example. An Indian tribe got land back in Big Sur as well. This is just a couple of weeks ago here, January 25th, a reclamation of a redwood forest in Northern California for the kind of long stewards of the land as well. People calling for the land to be returned after we had an oil spill off the coast. And so this, this is really the returning of it and the shifting of how settlers understand their place within which has been kind of incorrectly associated, right? And so this question right here is something that I always return to, and it is, why do American settlers insist on exiling history to the past? It's a question that I've been thinking about and tried to kind of engage in. This is a project in Germany called the Stolperstein, which means stumbling block, right? And it is these kind of brass plates put into the cobblestone to show where Jewish people lived and what their history was during and after the World War II, and so this kind of memory project has really happened in many countries, but it really hasn't occurred here, right? And so that's really the project that I'm investing in, is thinking about how, as artists, as community, as activists, as citizens, can we think of returning lands in a decolonial way, and understanding with great humility our place here, right? And so I'm going to show you several kind of artworks that have dealt with spirits, specters, the dead, and how that kind of connects to history. The first piece that I'll show you is called Los ABCs, Que Vivan los Muertos, which kind of came, this is our first animation that we did. We call it a documentary animation, in which attempts to kind of look at America and say, hey, wait a second, we don't really know the basics of our history. And so this was a way to use kind of a schoolhouse rock approach to understand how we can engage history in a different way. So I'm going to shift over to QuickTime if I can. Okay, I'm going to pick it up from A.
Everyone together, yeah! A is for Abu, who gazed at his reflection. B is for Bethlehem, who escaped inspection.
C is for Koyoshauki, who fell from the sky.
D is for doubt caught in a toxic lie.
E is for Emilio, thrown into the sea. F is for Frederick, hung from a tree. G is for Guillermo, asphyxiated by gas. H is for our homie, capped in the ass. H is for our homie, capped in the ass.
Que vivan los muertos de la guerra. Qué lástima, qué pena, qué gracia me dan.
Okay, so that is the Los ABCs, and you can see this, all of my work is online and you can see it for free, just do a search for it. We're kind of looking at using documentary animation. You can see where we're drawing from. Just going to run through this kind of quickly, rather quickly, to let you see. We like talking about Tao as the the worst environmental disaster in modern history, the Union Carbide Dow chemical plant in Bhopal, India, as well. F is Frederick, kind of referencing the Charles Lynch as an American Revolutionary war leader, and his particular brand of vigilante frontier justice that spread through. And you kind of see where we are drawing from with these trophy photographs that American settlers were so fond of as well. This piece is called The Muerto Rider, is a 68 Chevy Impala that I did in collaboration with Artemio Rodriguez. And it is kind of a dead lowrider. And the idea was to house within it stories of people's ancestors and there's the stories of their memories of the people who have passed. So people would sit inside the car as an installation and listen to these stories in a radio fiction, and this is really a part of the work, and has been installed in several museums as well. And this one really doesn't have to do with specters, but it is wanted to show you in the line of working with animation, white supremacy, and food necessity. This is Evil White Foods, taking salt, sugar, and flour and comparing them to white supremacy. And this was a PSA that we did for the LA bus system as well. And then the idea, the Frontera, which is a history of the 1680 Pueblo revolt. As a non-Pueblo person, I was invited to do a story of the Pueblo revolt, and this was a long project. It's a 20-minute documentary animation, and in this turn, young people talk a lot about being ghosted in relationships, right? Well, the practice of ghosting history or historical ghosting has been going on for a long time. In other words, stories that have disappeared from Americans' origin story. And the 1680 Pueblo Revolt was one of those. And in each leader, each Pueblo leader, each elder, each Pueblo person that I spoke to insisted that this is really truly an American story. It's a story that is that should be told within the origin story as well. And so we did a series of, or rather, a 20-minute documentary animation. I'm going to give you a taste of it here. And this is Las Entradas, right? So part of this was like me trying to figure out like what happened, how was the borderlands constructed, how did the Spanish come here? I didn't learn about it, so I had to kind of figure it out by myself and kind of teach myself through this understanding, that teach ourselves. And so here's a snippet of this piece here. And this is Coronado in his first expedition to the borderlands.
Of wealth and power. As Coronado departed, indigenous rebellions erupted in Nueva Galicia. Pueblos were developed and civilized societies, inhabiting dozens of autonomous villages, speaking several distinct languages, and establishing complex trade networks throughout North America. The Spaniards reached the Pueblo of Zuni at a very sacred time, interrupting an important ceremony. Zuni leaders confronted these extranjeros, and to protect the ceremony, they drew a sacred border of cornmeal before Coronado, warning him not to cross. This wealth of ancient tradition was of no interest to Coronado. He had come for gold, and gold alone. The Spanish crossed the line and waged many wars against the people of the Upper Rio Grande, taking all they could find. The Pueblo people directed him far east, hoping he would get lost and never find his way back. Coronado went searching and searching. For 2 years, he sought the cities of gold. In the end, Coronado spent his personal fortune finding nothing. Absolutely nada. He returned to New Spain a defeated man, indicted, tried, and convicted in Mexico City for the most brutal and violent crimes against the indigenous people of the Rio Grande. Coronado soon dies a spectacular failure. Having fouled the great river with the blood of its people, Coronado's specter would haunt those who followed his path. And the Pueblos would remember.
So that is Frontera. And you, like I said, you can definitely see this online. And if you just do a search for it, the next piece that I wanted to share with you was the piece that was in the Supernatural America show, which is called Destiny's Manifest. And it really was working with John Gass' Manifest Destiny painting, really, which was in my history book as a child. And thinking about like the westward expansion and terra nullius, the kind of open land that we perceived as colonizers, and then what was there in particular, really. So I'm going to show you just a brief snippet of this piece from the top here. This is a video installation. So that is from Destiny's Manifest, and engaging the notions of destiny and I'm sorry, I'm trying to read here. Somebody's, can we see the bottom corner? Okay. Cool. All right. Okay. So I think I'm coming to the end of my time, but I kind of wanted to speak to future projects that I have. And, during the pandemic, most of us sat down and reevaluated our practice and our research and our values, right? In terms of what is possible what is pressing, how and what we're capable of doing, right? In assessing these questions, we sat down with a longtime collaborator, Sean Levon Nash, who was Muskogee Creek artist and thinker, in our post-vaccination time to map out a creative path. And so we decided to do 3 films, one film for us, for ourselves, one film for our people, for our community, and one for kind of the larger publics as well. And the first piece that we did is called Les Itons, which is kind of considered a post-real PSA about life during the quarantine. We kind of from the outgrowth of the superstructures of surveillance capitalism, paranoia, white nationalism, and the kind of crazy news feed that we were dealing with back in 2020, 2021, and kind of looking at what is considered the post-real. It riffs on the 1962 sci-fi piece La Jetée, and is really seems like a very serious piece, but for us it is hilarious, and we had a great time doing it. It is, like I said, for us. So, but I'm going to show you a piece of it here, and just a disclaimer that really nobody here really speaks French, and no French words were harmed, or nobody was harmed while trying to speak French. And yeah, anyway, this is Les Itons. Okay.
But he grew bored with his isolation, bored with his fear, his own limitation.
He must leave his paranoia.
The only hope for survival lay in a loophole in time, and then maybe it would be possible to reach food, medicine, sources of energy.
That is les itons, which isn't really a word. It would be, if we were speaking correct French, it'd be les itations, but we're not. That is the next project we wanted to do for our people is called White History Month, and we realized that nobody really wants a White History Month, but we're going to give it to you anyway. And we are in Black History or Black Heritage Month, but White History centers in what Iran Kendi says that our need for white people, frankly speaking, to engage in a mass effort to re-educate ourselves out of our own ignorance, our own racial ignorance, and our fragilities and superiorities, right? And so White History Month really is it's a research-based animated speculative documentary that imagines a national reconciliation of America's genocidal past and unveils the pernicious legacies of American settler colonialism. A satirical, humorous documentary, but also kind of dealing with real histories. It asks, what if America settlers were to link history to the present, spawning their national reckoning with its past and marking a new era? And so White History, we're in the midst of working on it now. It includes a historic Supreme Court case of white people versus white history, a recollection such as Manifest Monday, residential school week. So we're kind of working things out. You know, the project is in development, but I'm trying to. I work through grants usually, but it's hard to imagine this getting funded. So we might have to do it on the edges of things. So that is the second project that I wanted to mention. And finally, I wanted to show the Eureka, which is the third project we embarked, is a history of animated history of California history from indigenous perspectives, right? And so there's three episodic 10-minute animated shorts, musical documentaries in the line that we worked on. It is kind of the sister project to Frontera. and deals with moments of resistance. And these are some of the resistance leaders and resistant moments, but also kind of the history of the mission bells, John Sutter, and the California Indian genocide, the discovery of gold as well. And so those are the projects that we have on our plate. And I'm going to stop share here. And I wanted to, I think that is the end of my talk. I mean, what I really would just kind of leave you with the idea that I think that we're kind of coming to a moment of deep humility and understanding and slowing down, and so this is our hope and our speculative futurity, that indigenous rising in the moments that we are experiencing and feeling and learning about now will kind of manifest themselves into a more equitable and conscientious futurity. So thank you all. If you have any questions, I guess if anybody's still there, I'll definitely kind of take questions.
So thank you, John, for this remarkable presentation and for making us think. And I want to thank you for your plural work. And just wanted to see if there's a question for John that you might have. But I also understand that there's a lot to digest and a lot to think through. And
I would take comments too, and luckily I'm not there. I mean, you can't really throw anything at me. You can try though. But
hold on, we have a question right here. Let me put my mask back on. Oh, do you have?
Hi, John. Great, fantastic work. I wanted to know how I could donate to your White History Month project, because I think it sounds completely great and awesome and necessary. So.
Oh, that's very kind of you. I'm not sure how to do that. I don't. I guess we can be in touch, but it's a project that is really kind of dear to. It's really in the line of what we've been doing. It from ABCs to Evil White Foods, White History Month. It seems like a trilogy that needs to be completed. So we appreciate your interest, and definitely we can be in touch for sure. So thank you.
So we can connect people to John
that's sweet.
To support this really important project. Any other comments or questions or thoughts?
Oh, I can see you now. It's great. Hello.
So this is very definitely something America needs to deal with, but the borders with Canada and Mexico are entirely artificial. And I was wondering if you've done any work particularly. So I'm Shelley, this is Alan. We sponsored your video here.
Oh, thank you.
I did a lot of work when I was at University of San Diego School of Law with the tribes on the borders. Mm-hmm. So I'm very familiar with how we just went in, threw in a border, doesn't reflect reality. So have you done any work south of the border in particular, and how are these issues being addressed by artists, particularly in Mexico, and particularly artists that are in that space?
Yes, definitely. There's been there has been a definite dialogue historically, and even with our kind of understanding of Mexico and Mexican Americanness, and between the trans-border and across borders as well, an exchange, a cultural exchange, a language, a learning, and also economic exchange. What the support, the backbone of our agricultural industry is really Mexican and Central Americans. Really, I'm working currently on a project with a dancer, Vanessa Sanchez, whose company La Mezcla has been involved in a community arts project with farm workers here in Half Moon Bay, which is just on the coast here, and there are a lot of farmlands there. And we are working with the workers through a group called Alas, which is a farm worker collective. doing interviews with them and engaging with them. There's a Farm Worker Fridays in which we donate to them, but also kind of go out and play music and dance. And then we shot a film based on our interviews and documents that we understand. So I think that to your question about, the expansiveness of the border, the elasticity of the border, it is elastic. It's not only that kind of firm line down south, it is really kind of expanded where people can get stopped by ICE here in my neighborhood, right? Where you can get stopped driving west on the 10. So the border there really is kind of expansive, and the United States has also funded a military surveillance and occupation of the southern Mexican border, right, as well. So there's this kind of large, expansive notion of control, even though these are some of the people who we talk about, essential workers, right, during the pandemic, who are really not only essential, but also kind of hidden from view. And you can kind of see that these are also kind of specters of the global economy in a way. So if that relates. So yes, thank you for your question. Thank you for your generosity as well. I really appreciate the interest.
So maybe we can take one more question. And I know that we have people also participating virtually. So if there is somebody out there who has a question, you can also put it in the chat. But here we have one more question from in the space here. Thank you.
Hi, Corrine, English teacher here. Thank you so much for your talk. This was wonderful. I teach a class on Afrofuturism and noticed a lot of overlap in especially your graphic novel and comic style, and noticed also your use of the word speculative in one of your future projects. And I was wondering if there was anything you were doing or have done or thinking about in terms of like indigenous futurity and what that might look like. I love the California history rewrite project that you're talking about, but in thinking of like futures and like what that might mean also for your work.
Oh, thank you so much. I also teach a sci-fi class, a speculative fiction course, and we center on indigenous futurism, Afrofuturism, Chicanx futurism as well. And so I find it fascinating. I find it a really rich terrain in which it reflects kind of like an expansion of time, a crunching of time, a mixing of time, of notions of past, present, and future, which are often part of indigenous thought, right? So the like white history, we kind of consider it a speculative documentary, and so we're documenting what has occurred. Or what will occur in a way, in a sense, according to our speculative, I guess, antennas, right? Or so historical antennas. So that I find this really a rich territory for offering possibility. And this is really the work of artists, I think, is to open up, one of the jobs of artists is to open up the possibility for transformation, right? And social transformation. And that is kind of through symbolic means, through activism, through community arts base, through serving the needs as well, but also through this kind of speculative notion of what is possible. And so, yes, indeed, that is really part of kind of looking back is also looking forward, right? And in the present as well. So history is present, history is futurity as well. The present is future. So that's really the basis of our work. So thank you for seeing that.
So thank you so much. Thank you all for being here tonight, despite the rain. And thank you again, John, for this really illuminating and very thoughtful talk. We will be thinking about the different propositions and speculative futures that you have opened up for us for time to come. So thank you again.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I really wish I could have been there because I know that our connections and the interesting conversations happen in the in-betweens and after and all of that. So I hope to have that happen in the future. So you all take care of yourselves, be well, and stay safe, please.
Thank you. Thank you. You too.
Saludos.